Hey, what's up, everyone? My name is Scott. I'm from Kapuskasing, Ontario. Um, this is raw. No masks, no filters, no pretending. I wanted to talk about a few things and about my life, and my journey. So, I've gone back and forth on whether or not I should share this story because I know there's going to be a lot of judgment. I live in a small town. People know me. People know parts of my past. And people have opinions. So, and honestly, that's okay. Because if sharing my story helps even one person take the first step towards healing, then it'll be worth it. So for most of my life, I've lived the way a lot of men are taught to live. I bottled things up. I avoided my emotions. I convinced myself that being strong meant handling everything on my own. I wore a mask. And eventually that mask became who I thought I was. The truth is, before I even started this journey, I wasn't showing up as the father I should have been. I wasn't fully present. I was drinking, working. I wasn't fully connected. I wasn't being the man my family needed me to be, And over time, these choices came with consequences. I lost parts of my family. I hurt the people I loved. And eventually I found myself looking in the mirror and realizing that if I wanted a different life, I had to become a different man. So, over 2 years ago now, I stopped drinking. I could see that the booze wasn't serving me anymore. I could see what it was doing to my relationships, my mindset, and the life I was trying to build. At the time, I thought that was the answer. I thought quitting drinking was going to fix everything. I thought I'd finally figured it all out. Around that same time, I began diving deeper into spirituality and personal growth. I was initiated into the lineage of King Solomon through the Modern Mystery School. I completed the Empower Thyself course. I spent time meditating, or trying to meditate, studying spiritual teachings, working with my guides, and learning different modalities. And for a while, I genuinely believed I was healed, or at least I was on my way. But looking back now, I can see something I couldn't see then. I was doing the practices, but I wasn't doing the deepest work. I thought meditation would heal me. I thought spiritual teachings would heal me. I thought energy work would heal me. But what I didn't realize was that healing practices can open the door, but they can't walk you through it. Deep down, I knew I was becoming stagnant. I knew there were parts of myself I wasn't willing to face. I knew there were wounds I was still avoiding. I just didn't want to admit it, Because the truth is, the deepest healing isn't found in what we're willing to learn. It's found in what we're willing to face. And it took me a long time to realize that. And most people never go there. Most people spend their entire lives running from their shadows, running from their pain, and running away from their childhood wounds. And, running from the parts of themselves they don't want to acknowledge. And I was no different. When you start bringing light in your life, that light doesn't just illuminate your strengths, it also illuminates your shadows. And that's where my real healing journey began. Not in the light, but in the darkness. In the fucking darkness. Oops. Life eventually humbled me in a way I never expected. Emotionally, I hit rock bottom. I lost the woman I loved. And for the first time in my life, I was forced to sit with myself. No distractions, no excuses, no running, just me and the truth. And that was hard. I remember one night sitting alone, and I was watching a video my brother sent me, and I was saying to God, I can't do this anymore. My way. Take over. Because I don't want to do it my way anymore. And that moment changed everything. Because surrender isn't weakness. Sometimes surrender is just the strongest thing someone can do. It was in that darkness that I finally accepted that I needed help. And real help. Not another book, not another meditation, not another spiritual concept. I needed to understand why I was the way I was. I needed to understand the wounds that were driving my behaviors as an adult. So I found the courage to go to therapy. And I specifically sought out inner child therapy because I knew there were parts of me or parts of my childhood that were still affecting me as an adult. For the first time, I wasn't treating symptoms, I was going right to the source. And that's the foundation. I returned to Modern Mystery School and completed the Ritual Master Program, which gave me an entirely new perspective on responsibility, healing, personal transformation. But here's what I learned. Healing isn't about becoming perfect. Healing is about becoming honest. Honest with yourself. It's about having the courage to look back at yourself with no excuses, without blame, without hiding. It's about taking responsibility for your life while you're still having compassion for the wounds that shaped you or made you who you are. And that's not easy. It's the hardest thing I've ever done. In fact, it might be the hardest thing a human can do. But it's also one of the most rewarding things you can do for yourself. So over the coming weeks and months, I'm hoping to have enough courage to share this journey with you. The victories, the setbacks, the lessons, the inner child wounds, the healing process itself, the spiritual path, therapy, the fears that I have, and the ongoing work it takes to become a better man. There'll be people who remember the old version of me, and honestly, they're not wrong. They're not wrong. That version of me existed. And I've made mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've hurt people. I've fallen short when it comes to raising a boy, being a man for a family. But the growth begins when we stop hiding from the truth. And especially for the guys and the men watching this. There's a lot of good men out there carrying pain in silence, and there's a lot of men who want help, but they don't know where to start. A lot of men who think vulnerability makes them weak, but I believe the opposite is true. Because it takes more courage to speak your truth than it does to hide behind a mask. Real, strength isn't pretending you're okay. Strength's being honest when you're not. And because if we're disconnected from ourselves, we can't show up for our partners, we can't show up for our children, our families, or life purpose. And this isn't a story about having all the answers. It's a story about taking responsibility for your life. It's a story of redemption, and it's a story about becoming the man that I should have been all along. I'm not perfect, and I never will be. But every single day I'm committed to becoming better than I was yesterday. So this is like my chapter 1. This is raw, no bullshit, no masks, no running, no pretending. And if you're on your own healing journey, then welcome, and let's walk it together. Have a good day, guys.